So today we are joined by Jacklyn Dallas, one of my great friends, and you probably already heard the bio. She is a prolific YouTuber, creator, businesswoman, and just all over great person. But the reason why I'm so pumped to chat with Jacklyn is because she has a really unique perspective as someone who is one digitally native, right? She's 23. She's grown up in the thick of, the evolution of tech. Two, she is deeply knowledgeable about technology itself, both the hardware and software sides. And the third and most important is she is incredibly skilled at connecting people, both in interviews and that she does for her YouTube channel, but also through building this community in New York City and beyond. So I'm pumped for this conversation. Jacklyn, thank you for joining.
I am so honored to be here. Randy's like one of my favorite friends, best friends, and I just admire like literally everything that you do. So this is an honor, truly.
Awesome. Let's get into it. So, based on those 3 points that I just hit on, digitally native, knowledgeable about tech, and skilled at connecting people, how do you think about the intersection of those things in both your life and your work?
Yeah, love that question and love what you're doing because I feel like we're in this really important, pivotal moment in society where technology is evolving faster than ever with artificial intelligence, medical technology, productivity, and social media. And then we're also experiencing a loneliness pandemic and people going out a lot less. If you look at like the statistics of like the amount of people that meet on dating apps versus meet in real life, or the amount of people that would say they have a best friend, things are down bad a little bit. And so one of the things that I admire about you is that you're teaching people how to have a healthy relationship with tech because I'm so excited and passionate about technology, but I think that nothing's like inherently good or bad. It's like how we use it. And I think that as it becomes more addicting and more useful, we are going to have to navigate that relationship.
Totally. And to take a step back, why don't you tell people a bit about your story, just the high level? I think, again, something that's really unique about you, especially for young people, is like you've been doing this for 10 plus years. You've seen, especially in tech, kind of the evolutions of the smartphone, consumer social, all of the AI now, like all of these things that have kind of ebbed and flowed. So yeah, catch people up in terms of what you're working on and also, that people side of things, what you do in the city.
Yeah, love that. Okay, so I started the channel when I was 13 because my grandma always needed tech help. So I was like sending her little videos on like how to reset your email password or Kindle. And my grandma's like one of the smartest people I know. And so I felt like um, if she was able to like grasp this new technology concept, she's a really quick learner. And then it was kind of a good barometer for me on like what was interesting and how to explain things. And I quickly fell in love with like recording videos and talking about technology. And even like pre YouTube, like pre 13, tech was like always my life. Like I used to intern at like a coding camp and like help campers when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and like I just was always obsessed with it. And so I still am. And I think when I was starting out, like around that time, that was like first wave YouTube, where you had like Annoying Orange and Vsauce and like all the OG creators. Um, and I just love the idea that you were no longer limited by like your ability to like get into traditional media to like post and reach thousands or millions of people. It was now just like the quality of the content that you post on YouTube. So I posted my first video at 13. And then I continued it all throughout middle school, high school, and college. And then I just graduated like semi recently. And so I was doing it full time in school, but like now I'm actually like full time, not balancing both. Um, and I think that like this year is kind of the one where we're seeing a lot of the promises that were made years ago actually come to fruition or start to. So, for example, things like robotics. Like I feel like since we were kids, you would see like iRobot or like other movies that would show humanoid robots. A lot of times like in a dystopian way. But now this year we're seeing like the Tesla robot maybe come to fruition. A lot of Chinese companies are producing robots or things like artificial intelligence. Years ago, you saw the movie Her. That was kind of dystopian. Now we kind of have things that are very much like Her. Another example would be like supersonic planes, basically planes that travel at the speed of sound. They were banned in 2003 for being like really expensive, but also like very loud. Like breaking the sound barrier is very loud, so it would be like 110 decibels, and it was scaring people on the ground. Now there's this new company that's going to re-engineer the way the sound waves refract off the plane. So it's like all these things that we saw earlier are actually coming to fruition now, and it feels like kind of the greatest time ever in technology. And at the same time, I think that we're experiencing a lot of existential threats with it. So I think it's kind of at both end, but one of the most exciting parts about my job is getting to talk to the people that actually make the tech and interview them and hear what they're excited about.
For sure. And there's a pretty large cohort of listeners and readers in my work that skew to that 18-24 age, that Gen Z age. And a lot of those people are starting to stray away from kind of those conventional paths and want to be creators, right? They're inspired by the Mr. Beast of the world and the streamers. And that is a huge career path for them. Whereas before, everyone said, I want to be an astronaut when I grow up. I want to be an astrophysicist. Now I want to be a YouTuber. As someone who's done it for 10 years, what's something about being a content creator, and then also one specifically in the tech space, that a lot of people don't see or understand?
Ooh, you're such a good interviewer. I love that. Okay, I think it's a million different things. I think that in any job, like the output is like 1% of what the job actually is. So like the output in the YouTuber case is like the video, and that's like 1% of the job, like the final result. But like the input is the 40 hours of research of like learning about supersonic planes, for example, the flying to the site, the meeting this, the like founder, CEO, the music, the editing. So like I think that for any job, you kind of have to fall in love with the process of the job over the output of the job, because the output of the job is like much more minimal. Kind of like if you're a writer, like I know you've written a book, a lot of it is like actually the writing process, and then a very small part of it is like publishing the book. And I also think that we kind of fall in love with things that we're good at. So inherently, when you start anything, you will suck, and then it takes like 10,000 hours and repetitions to get better. And so I think for anyone listening that wants to start YouTube, it's like an acknowledgement of like it is a very learnable skill. You can 100% do it. You just have to show up consistently, and you'll start to like it more and more as you get better at it. Like it can be demotivating at times. I feel like if you start something and you're really bad, like if you go to the gym and like it goes terribly, it's really easy not to want to go to the gym again. But like actually being weaker is how you get stronger. And I think it's like a really similar thing to YouTube. So I'd say that's like one thing that people don't see. And then the other one, I think is like in general, the skill of like learning how to write and storytell about an idea is pretty transferable to any niche. And so like that's the core skill of YouTube. But like learning how to write a cold email is like going to help you get promoted at a job or help you make friends. And so I think that if I were to recommend like one skill to someone, it's like the ability to like write in a really concise way that like tells your idea. Like the ability to transfer emotions through writing, I think is like the most important skill in life.
Yep. And you talked about creating these 10,000 videos. And naturally, you hear the Mr. Beast thing too, where he's like, just do one thing better every single time. Come back to me after 100 videos. You're going to see some progress. I think now more than ever, there's kind of this constant pressure in the creator space to feed the algorithm and almost build your video around what the algorithm wants in order to get in front of people. And I'm sure you were thinking about that for years, but now more so than ever, it seems like that's kind of the core thing, that people are sacrificing the creativity in order to game the algorithm. Now, as someone who's kind of more of an established YouTuber, you have this big audience, things are constantly changing on the algorithm front, the platform front. How do you balance, creating the work that you love and continuing to improve your craft while also keeping up with the demands of the algo?
Yeah, I think that if you replace the word algorithm with audience, it makes everything a lot easier. Like the algorithm is just trying to serve the audience. So definitely there are things that are just like, ooh, optimize it this way. But in general, like the best videos win. And so if there's ever been a time where I have a video that really underperforms and I'm like, I thought that video was super good. If I look back 6 months, I can typically see like what happened with the video and why it wasn't good enough. And so I think that the idea that people should have it like makes you feel like you have more control is like, if the video does well, it's like what people want. And if it didn't do well, like either like maybe it's just like time and market, like you just need to spend a little more time making more work because eventually one will do well and then downstream effects your whole catalog will. But in general, like all the platforms are designed to serve the audience and give them really good content. And so I think like that's actually exciting because in traditional media, you need so many different people to say yes to you. Like there are a lot of gatekeepers. And so like if you make it or don't make it is dependent on how talented you are, but then also very dependent on who you know. And it feels like more so with YouTube and social media, it's dependent really how talented you are. Like there's definitely a little bit of like who you know, but in general, it's like much more about what type of content you make. And then on like the note of like the algorithm though, like in the last 2 years, I pivoted a lot. So like I think when you and I first became really good friends, I was making videos very heavily about like consumer tech, which is still like a huge part of the brand, but it was like very much reviews. And I was kind of noticing like a lot of my friends in New York are founders. And I would have conversations with them where like they would never use an Android phone in a million years. But they were very excited about all these other areas of technology, whether it be like health tech, like wearables like the Whoop, or space tech, or like, let's say, planes is another good example, or like farming, like all these like broader areas of technology. And my videos at the time were not covering it. Like it was very consumer based. Like I would review 50 different phones in a year. And so I really wanted to pivot from that to covering like the bigger stories. And that pivot took a lot of time. Like it was not an easy pivot because there was a certain subset of the audience that just cared about the consumer technology, but I felt like that was a much smaller subset than what the millions of people that care about all the other stuff. And what really helped, honestly, was the interviews because I was able to talk to someone that everyone knew. So they were willing to give me a chance by clicking on the video, and then the questions were unexpected. So like they would assume that I would ask like Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google, about the Pixel phone, but instead I was asking about climate change tech. And so it was like you could get them in the door with something that was relatable to them and then broaden it. And so I think for any creator listening, if you feel like you're pigeonholed into a niche, figure out the thing that your audience will like that then can help you expand outside of it.
That's great advice. And yeah, that Sundar interview is fantastic. And I'm
Thanks.
curious because you alluded to, and especially during that pivot, you're not going to hit all the videos. Not everyone is going to be a 1 out of 10. So on the ones that do kind of call it miss the mark, even if you love it, how do you kind of separate your sense of self from that audience validation? Is that something that you've needed to kind of build that muscle over time?
Yeah, I honestly still don't think I have that. Like, if a video gets a 10 out of 10, I'm like, oh God, like, what happened here? Like, I just care so much. And I think that's like the double-edged sword of like entrepreneurship or ambition is like you put everything into the project and then it kind of sucks if it doesn't go the way you want. But also, I think like a massive understanding for me or like learning has been sometimes video will bomb out of the gate and then like down the line it will do really well. Like, I just had a video that I did on like banned sports tech, basically like tech that made athletes too good in sports that they ended up banning it. It's called like tech doping. And when I first made that video, it bombed. It was like 400 views in a day, so bad. And I was like, damn it, I really think it's a good video. I'm like shocked. And then I went back and I checked it last week and it just hit like 100,000 views. And so it's like that video was a 10 of 10. Now it's like a 1 of 10. So you just never know how it's going to play out. Obviously, that's like an edge case where it was so different. But I think that that does happen a lot. And specifically for the interviews, that's just like something that I feel like is missing in the market is like really good tech conversations. And so like even if every single one doesn't hit, I have like a lot of conviction that like the format is valuable, and every single time I do it, I learn stuff. So I think like that plus like comments, like the community really helps a lot. Like if a video gets like a 10 out of 10, but then the comments are more meaningful, like that helps me want to keep going.
For sure. And I think that's also like there's something there too, especially for creators when they're just starting out, when those first could be 6 months, year, 2 years, depending on kind of your own path. It feels like you're shouting into the void, right? Like you might get like
Yeah.
1 or 2 likes at most, maybe a comment, that's it. And people really get caught up in those vanity metrics. But the way that I try to explain it to people, and especially writing on the internet, which I think is one of the highest leverage
Yeah.
things that you could do, is you never know who's reading. So, like, depending on what your goal for writing that is or what you're in the market for, it could be genuine connection. It could be to meet like minded people. It could be to get a new job. If you have a business, it could be to close a deal. If you get 5 likes or 5 views, but one of those views is someone who opens up this opportunity or unlocks this door, that is inherently valuable and way, way more valuable than 1,000 likes of people that have no meaning to you, or they're not an audience that you would actually want to go and hang out with or build. And so I think it's also important to understand like what type of validation you're getting from the audience and who that audience is, because if you don't care about their opinion to begin with, it ultimately doesn't really matter.
I love that. Yeah, like there are people that make like very negative videos and it's like you know that like a new thing will come out and the title will be like reasons it sucks, and it's like that maybe gets a lot of views, but like is that the audience that you want? Probably not. Like I want optimistic people that like think that the future is going to be better, not worse. So it's like what you put out becomes a magnet for the type of people you attract. Similarly, like so Randy and I host second degree dinners in New York together where like we'll both invite a friend and then our friend invites a friend, so it's a great way to meet people. And every time you and I have posted about that, it goes viral. And like that tweet going viral attracts the right audience. Like we've gotten so many amazing people to come to our dinners from that tweet. Whereas I feel like if we were posting like the New York tech scene is dead and it's horrible, whatever, like that may also go viral, but for a very different reason, and it would not get the people that we want.
Yeah, that is a great point. And I'm going to put a pin in that because we're going to come back to the human side of things and the bringing people together after this. But I'm curious, as someone who lives and breathes technology, and even more so in the sense that, you're often doing these like day in the life reviews or week in the life reviews where you're testing different wearables. So it's like really on and you have the camera on you. Do you put any guardrails in your own life, or are there certain things that you try to stay mindful of as far as just digital wellness and kind of finding that balance?
Yeah, you've honestly inspired me a lot with the newsletter. Like I read it every week, and I think that it's so important. Like you were the first person that actually told me about Brick, which is like the hardware tool that will literally brick your phone and make it so you can't use it. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday who's like one of the most brilliant people I know, and he was saying that he's doing a graduate degree in Boston. He was saying that he's around like some of the smartest people in the world, and they all have phone addictions. And he was like, even the smartest people that don't want to be addicted are addicted. So like it's out of our control, and if you just rely on like discipline, it's probably not going to get you there. So you need systems. And so I think about it a lot. Like there have definitely been periods in my life where I have like very high screen time and it's like not great, but it's often like caused by other things. Like maybe it's like I don't have enough social things, or like maybe I'm like injured so I can't go out as much. Like there's normally another reason that's like leading to the overconsumption of the phone. And I think like going back to our earlier point of like nothing is inherently in general good or bad. It's like how you use it. I think that social media is like amazing, but I also think that there's a way in which you can use it where it can become like toxic. And so I definitely use technology a lot more than the average person because of my job, but I feel like I love it so much, and like I'm able to kind of most of the time use it in a really healthy way. Although I will say, like last night, I really wanted to go to bed early because I was getting up early, and I like was on Twitter for 2 hours, and then had like the worst hangover from it, being like, why did I do that? So I think it's like
100%.
not a perfect system for sure.
Yeah, I think what your friend said is pretty spot on. And it's interesting too that especially kind of the founder high performer archetype, they tend to be very driven people. And they also tend to understand the importance of health as it relates to every other aspect of your life. So those are the people who are using the Whoop or the Apple Watch and tracking their sleep and, almost like over optimizing every health data point in their life. But that's the one area that people still don't kind of tie into wellness as a whole, and it has
Yeah.
grave impacts. Like that sleep example that you provided, those 2 hours of sleep were probably pretty helpful and worthwhile as far as like emotional regulation and creativity. And like you said, you felt kind of foggy this morning. And so I'm curious if that's something that, as you continue to use tech more and more, and these things are going to get more immersive and more thoughtful, you plan on kind of trying to mediate.
Yeah, I think you got to. The one that helps me a lot is putting the phone in grayscale mode. That just makes it like a lot more addicting. So for anyone that doesn't know, you can like go into accessibility on the phone if you're on like an iPhone, and then turn on like grayscale, where it could be a shortcut. If you triple click the power button, it will make the phone black and white. You could do it on Android too, and like that alone just makes the phone a lot less addicting, because the colors that we see on our phones are a lot more vibrant than the real world. And if you make it grayscale, then the real world suddenly becomes more vibrant. That helps a lot. The one that does not help at all for me is like the screen time lock, because I just bypass it. There are
Yep.
like apps like Opal that make it a little bit better because it like makes you check in with yourself. I think Brick is really good because it's like physical hardware. But I honestly think the best strategy for people to get off their phone more is to fill your life with more good things. Like, it's really hard if social media is the only way that you're really getting dopamine to then like take that away, and not like, you need to fill that dopamine that you're getting from there with like another habit that's healthier for you, whether it be like working out or like hanging out with friends or a relationship, like whatever it is, that needs to be something else. I think it just makes it easier.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I wrote a post a couple weeks ago about like your screen time starts with your calendar. And
Love
it's
that.
essentially, being able to do what you just said, schedule in those things and be really ruthless with prioritizing those. But once you have them in the calendar, even if you don't do it every day, at least there's something default there that that during this time I should be doing it, as opposed to having this completely empty calendar. And then it's very easy to kind of let everything else fill in the gaps. So I love that.
Agreed.
I'm curious, when you're working, this is both just for like getting inspiration and refreshing while working, and then also for the screen time aspect. Do you have some kind of like trigger, or does something happen when it's time to like step away and recalibrate? Like you could be slamming your head trying to get an edit right, and then you step away for 30 minutes and you come back and you see it with an entirely different lens. But do you have that, whether that's for work or just I've been on my screen a lot, like I should probably like
Yeah.
some grass or get some air?
Totally. Yeah, I think like the ones that like, I feel like there's like different types of like technology usage. Like there's like the type that I think we're talking about, which is like bad, where you're just like endlessly scrolling and you just feel inherently like a lot worse after it. I try to like really not do that a lot, because I there's never a time where I feel better. But also like most of the time when I'm on social media, I'm like a student. Like I'm watching videos and I'm looking at how they hook the viewer, what's the storytelling like, what's like the compelling shots. Like I'm looking at it purely from like this educational, excited, like artistic purpose. And so like that is really fun for me. I feel like the times where I'm like not intentional is like when it gets bad. And then also like regarding editing, that could be like a 15-hour in front of the computer type of thing. But honestly, 99.9% of the time, I find that like really energizing, and it's great and it feels like creative. I think like the 0.1% of the time where you're like, oh my God, you just gotta like rely on discipline and get through it. Because ultimately, like I think about the quote all the time. It's an action first and a feeling second. Like sometimes you don't feel like doing the thing, but then the second you just like start, you can like trick your brain into actually wanting to do it. And a lot of times, like we anticipate it's going to be a lot worse than it actually is, like a cold shower or something. And there's like a part of your brain actually that Andrew Huberman talks about a lot, which is like the part of your brain that strengthens when you do things that suck. So it's like you build it via willpower and discipline of doing things that are like hard and you don't like. It does not build as much if it's hard but you like it. And so I kind of think about that anytime I have to do something that is bad. I'm like, all right, but I get to build this part of my brain. So I think a lot of things in life are just like a mindset.
100%. I mean, that initial kind of ramp up to getting started and everything compounds, but that's always the hardest. Like I know even
Yeah.
sometimes, especially when I'm on my phone and I want to go read, even if it's like picking up my Kindle or the books right there, like
Yeah.
that is the hardest part. Putting it
It's
down.
crazy.
I read. I love reading. I'm in it for like an hour, 2 hours. I could sit there all day. But that initial just like switch what I'm doing, and it tends to generally be something technology based, to go and pick up that book is always the hardest part for me.
Yeah, why do you think that's so hard? Because it's like right there. You literally could do it, but it's so difficult.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is the apps are designed to exploit that hardwiring, but also it's, I think, like you said, you just got to train yourself and schedule that time in where it's like, all right, if I know I'm going to go read, and especially if it's doing something that you enjoy, really go in and make time for that. And I think that's one thing that I talk about with a lot of people who are trying to cut the screen times. Like, you always need to have a time transfer. Like, if you're measuring something, first of all, I don't think that overarching big screen time number that you see in your settings means anything. So I look at it as an app level. So it's like more,
Okay.
okay, which apps do you want to spend less time on? And then from there, the best way to track that progress is not, okay, did I take my Instagram from 4 hours to 2 hours? Because if you use that 2 hours that you saved to like scroll through your photo apps or like get hammered, like whatever that is, like it's not a great, reinvestment of that time. But if you say, all right, my goal is to cut Instagram by 2 hours and then also read 5 books this month, and you're currently reading 0, and you keep all other variables constant, and the next month your Instagram's down and you've read the 5 books, you can very easily see that time is transferred. And so I always try to tell people to pick some type of time transfer, some type of thing that you really want to go and invest that time into. And that's a much easier way to go and build that. And then naturally, when you have that thing, you can go and schedule it on your calendar, which when that calendar invite pops up or that appointment pops up, it's a lot easier to go and put down the phone and jump into that, because you know that you're supposed to be doing that.
What are the trends like you see in people's data? Because obviously now you're looking at like hundreds of people's screen time. What have you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, the social media apps are still the biggest. I think a lot of people, similar to you, it's less about like how many pickups per day, even though that's high, but it's like getting into those 2 hour blocks where it's like something's not going on and they might be doing great all week, and then they open up Instagram for something with a positive intention. Or they open up a LinkedIn with something for a positive intention, like I'm going to go answer that DM, or I'm need to search something up for work. And next thing you know, you're like 2 hours down in the rabbit hole. You blink and you're like, what the fuck just happened? And that's what gets a lot of people. And then from there, they kind of get frazzled. They feel like they almost failed, like they failed their task. And then they immediately hit back into the cycle. And so one thing that I've been actively, working with people and thinking about myself of like, how can you design something, or whether that's like a mental model or some type of product, to help you jump right back into it after you've kind of broken the pattern? How can you kind of course correct and get right back into it? And so that's something
I love that. That's so interesting. Yeah, it's almost like the gym, right? Like when you go every single day, it's a lot easier to keep the habit. And then when people miss like 4 or 5 days, I feel like it's like, it could easily be a momentum spiral where you're like, well, now I'm not a gym goer.
That literally just happened to me. Like I've been going like 4 or 5 times a week, and then I got sick. We were traveling, whatever. It was like 3 weeks I hadn't been, which is literally the longest that it's been in like 2 years. I felt terrible. I felt worse because I was like, this was something that I used to do and now I'm not doing it. And it's very easy to lose that momentum. Like you made a post recently about how momentum is everything and you got to go and manufacture that. But yeah, I think it's very similar as far as building the positive momentum and being mindful about your tech wellness and digital wellness for sure.
Love that. Yeah. And I think like even the best people in the world have a struggle with momentum at times. Like it's a universal thing. So it's like, if I was someone listening to this right now and I felt like I was in a rut, like if you just give yourself momentum, which is obviously a lot easier said than done, you just do the hard thing one time, like everything else unlocks. It just becomes so much easier. Like it's so much easier to keep going once you already have a little bit of like action, like things in motion, stay in motion type of thing. And so similarly, like if you like do like a 2-hour doom scroll and you're like, F that, like now I'm down bad. It's like, just don't do it again. And now you're back on the path. And I think like also sometimes if you look at like your own life, you could just be like an unreliable narrator in your own life. And so like what also helps me with like, if I want to build a habit or like change something about myself, I just kind of assume that I already am that person with like that character trait. And then I like reverse engineer, like what would that person do? And then you just like decide to do those things. So like if you're wanting to be a YouTuber, it's like, what would a YouTuber do? They would probably like study the platform pretty religiously, watch what's successful. They would fall in love with storytelling. They would record themselves in public all the time on their phone to like get comfortable in front of camera. they would study like storytelling methods, like whatever it is, you just start doing those things, and then like slowly day by day you become the person. And I think similarly with like tech wellness, it's like you slowly stop using the apps in a negative way, and then slowly become a person that has like a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I love it. I want to apply that same idea to building in-person relationships, because one thing that goes really hand in hand with a lot of this, tech stuff is kind of the loneliness epidemic, people desperately craving real life connection, and especially for some of the younger generation, having anxiety about going and building those relationships. And like I said at the start, I think between your skill of interviewing and kind of connecting with people on a one-on-one basis for that regard, but then also the community building aspect. So you mentioned the dinners that we've done together. You also have your own dinner series. You throw events. You're just a naturally very social, high energy person. How can you apply that if you aren't someone, but also, you have this massive online audience? How does that translate to real connection? Because we met through the internet. I've met
Yeah.
a lot of great friends through the internet. I've been in people's weddings that I've met through the internet. But for a lot of people, that sounds super foreign. So I'm curious just to get your broader take on, how you think about all that.
Yeah, I love that framing. I feel like you honestly can answer this question just as well because we have like I think similar personality types. And thank you. I would say okay. I think like anything in life, it's a momentum game. So it's like when I first moved to New York City, I moved like during peak COVID. So it's like very difficult to meet people. Like a lot of the gyms were closed. People were wearing masks all the time. Like no one was really going out. And it was like the first time in my life where like I didn't really have friends or know anyone like in the place that I was living because like I grew up on so many different sports teams and I was like always very social in school. And then I started YouTube when I was like super young, so I had like work friends always. And then I moved to the city and I knew like one person. And the first like I would say like month was like really difficult. I was also homesick. It was starting college, but during a pandemic. So it was like none of the thing like you didn't have like orientation where you're meeting people in person. All the classes were on Zoom. It was like kind of the worst way to start
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And I think for you it was like maybe the last year of college because we're right or did you
I
already
got out
graduate?
right before. I got lucky. I
Yeah.
was unscathed.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. So, anyways, it was really tough. And I remember just like being alone, like in my apartment, and it had been like hours, and I was like, wow, I've literally talked to no one all day. Like, I've never in my life like had a period of time where like I don't say, and I was like, all right, I need to change this. And I started just going to events. And like once you meet kind of like one person that fits your vibe, it then becomes so much easier. It becomes like a flywheel of serendipity to meet like a million people that are like that. And that kind of changed my life. Like I remember I went to a tech event and I met like this other like YouTube creator, and then he had a bunch of friends that I met, and then quickly we kind of all became friends. And then it snowballed, and like now it's flash forward like 3.5 years, and I feel like I have like my favorite friends ever in my life, and New York's like amazing. So I think like it's going to events in person is like the big one, and then I also think like finding the events where your type of person would show up is like very important. Like I personally am not really into like getting blackout drunk every weekend type of thing. So like for me, it would not like go to a bar would probably not be my ideal way. Like maybe there would be some people there that I really like, but like that would not be my ideal type of way to meet someone. Whereas like going to your events or like going to Andrew's events or founders dinners, like that's gonna probably yield like a much more similar type of person to me. So I would say that's really helpful. And then on the interview question versus like in person, I think like conversational chemistry is kind of everything. It's like how does the person feel when you're talking, and like everyone has more things in common than they have like things not in common. And so like hitting on like the core fundamental things that like we all like want and are interested in is like the easiest way to create like conversational chemistry. And I feel like there's always a moment in the conversation when like you get the opt-in from the person where it's like you said something that like really resonates and now they're on board, and then you kind of like double down on that. And I think the same thing for like a networking event. Like if you're walking in alone and you feel like nervous or intimidated, the psychological response that your body has to nerves and excitement is actually exactly the same. And so Mel Robbins always says you could just like trick your brain into being like, I'm actually really excited right now. And like your body will think about it, and then you won't release cortisol, which is like the stress hormone, so you'll feel better. And then also like everyone is kind of in that position, like because we're in like a loneliness epidemic, like most people going to these events are pretty nervous about going, and they'll be actually really excited if you come in and you're like confident and you're talking to them.
Totally. And then what changed from being a participant in these events to then wanting to go and host your own? And I know with the momentum for me, like I started going to a lot of these events too. I met a lot of people through the internet, yourself included, like we said, and I'm curious on that point after that we'll touch on. But how do you kind of turn that gap from participant, you build up kind of these people that you meet throughout the events, you have this great group of people, then going and being the connector, being the host? And what would you say the things that you've learned from kind of both of those and making that gap are?
Love that question. Yeah. Honestly, like my whole life, I've always loved like introducing people and like hosting things. I just think it's so fun. Like my parents are like very into hosting, and they've always had like a lot of friends. So I've always loved it. And like on the sports teams and stuff, we'd often like host at my house. So I feel like it was kind of always something that I liked. And then one of my best friends in the city is this guy named Andrew, who is Andrew's Mixers, and he was hosting like events all the time, and it like completely changed his life. He moved from like China and then Canada and then to New York, and he kind of also moved during COVID and was like, damn, like I don't know many people here. So he started hosting like dinner parties. That snowballed into like events with thousands and thousands of people. I've met like some of my best friends through him, including him. So I've seen all these events happen. And then actually, like you were a huge catalyst because you had texted me about like second degree dinners, which is like what we mentioned earlier. And you're like, we should just host one. And we did. And I think it was just like an amazing night that it became like a pretty low lift thing. Like I feel like people are very intimidated by hosting events because depending on how you scale it up or down, it can actually be like a very big lift and expensive. But there's like a MVP, like a minimal viable product that's like pretty low lift where you just invite people to a restaurant and you all split the bill and everyone just hangs out. Like that's like kind of the lowest lift, and then you can like rent an event space and catering. Like there are ways to do it. But ultimately, like the reason that people show up to events is because of who they're going to meet there, like the genuine like connections and friendships. So like all the extra stuff of a mansion or a private chef, like that is cool, but it doesn't need to be there. Like if the people are really good, everyone will be excited to come. So I think it was like your and my dinners, and then I started Founders Dinners Club, which is like a dinner series every month where I just invite like some of my favorite friends in the city that all happen to be founders. And that was great. It honestly, that came from just hanging out with people all the time and being like, wow, I love like a dinner party vibe. And there's so many people that I love that I think would also like each other. So it was like informally introducing them, and then I think like at 3 a.m. one night I was like up late editing, and I was like, this would kind of be cool. Like we should do it. So I just like found the Instagram handle and started it.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, as someone who's been to those dinners, the quality of person and being able to curate that and understand, who's going to be in attendance, even who should sit next to each other, the almost pre-setting up certain conversations based on the interest that of both people. I think you're really thoughtful with that. And it goes a really, really long way. And I'm also curious as a creator, and this is something that I've been working on content-wise, you have this one-to-many relationship, right? You put out a video, millions of people see it. I put out a newsletter, thousands of people see it, whatever. How do you then take that to become a one-to-one relationship with the right people who are consistently showing up? They're replying to your emails. Like last week, I got on the phone with a few readers. There was in Mexico City, one was in India, and like getting to bring that relationship outside of a name that I continuously see popping up to a real person and forming that, to me, is one of the favorite parts of creating online. And I'm lucky that over the last 5-6 years, I've gotten to do that a bunch. How do you think about that truly at scale, right? Like I have a few thousand followers, you have hundreds of thousands. Like
That's
what,
a ton, though.
at different points, what does that look like?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I remember also like you were saying that people will email you about your book, which is like, I think writing a book also is like a forever project. Like someone will read this in 50 years and it will still be relevant. And I think that like the connection that you have by like reading a book, it almost feels like reading someone's like monologue, like their inner thoughts. So it creates like a really intimate connection. Similar with video. It's like, it's your voice, it's your face, it's your thoughts. Like it's so intimate that even though it's like one to many, it honestly already feels like it's one to one because the viewer experience isn't one to many. Like they're not sitting with all the other people watching it. So it inherently it's set up kind of one to one. And then I keep on notifications for every single comment. So I'll just like see them all come in and I'll respond to all of them. So I think that helps a lot. And I think it also helps that like the content that you put out is a magnet for the types of things that you want to attract. So it's like, if I post a video, the person watching that video is probably my type of person. Like they're probably going to be like energetic and like driven and excited about things and like really into like heavy research and technology. Like all the things that I care about because it's reflected in the video will hopefully be the things that the viewer cares about as well. So like we kind of have an instant bond. And I also look a lot at like Taylor Swift. Like I think that she is like the smartest, not only like storyteller, writer, whatever, but like also like entrepreneur and community builder. And I think the way that she's built her career over like 20 years is like so inspiring because it feels like when you watch her, you're like friends, even though obviously every single person in the world feels that way. And so I think like, how does she do it? It's like doing the unscalable things. Like she'll play at a fan's wedding or she'll like write handwritten notes. Like all of those little things I think really like compound into building a brand that like feels like it's you.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Swiftie at heart,
Yeah.
so I fully relate. And yeah, she does it perfect. And I think that the handwritten note aspect, I took that from Jesse Itzler, talks all about it on his podcast and stuff. I started doing this year for people. And one, it's nice and almost like cathartic to write out and show appreciation for the people in your lives, but it does go a really long way. As someone who's this year received notes from people and also sent it, it goes a really long way. And all right, cool. So we covered kind of that segment. The pod, last 10 minutes, we're going to jump into rapid fire. So I'm just going to shoot some
Let's
fun
go.
tech related questions at you. You don't need to go in depth. You can go in depth, but it can also be
Okay.
quick. And then we will close this out. But to start, what is the last app that you deleted and why?
Ooh, damn, that is such a good question. Okay, I have to think about that. Okay, maybe like a translator app, because I travel a lot for work, and I have like a third-party translator. But now Google has a feature where you could just take a photo and it will translate it like live for you on the picture, so there's no need for a third-party app anymore. That'd be
Totally.
like the last one.
Yeah, I use that Google app all the time. It's saved my ass many a
Let's
time.
go. Yeah, because you're traveling like all the time. I feel like that's another podcast that you should do. Like, how do you make friends when you're solo traveling? Because you're one of the few people I know that like goes to a random city and instantly comes back with like many people that love you and like you just have a good relationship.
Yeah, I was actually just speaking with a travel company, and we're going to do an article about
Oh, let's go.
digital wellness when travel, because there is a lot to be said about being very intentional about how you use your phone when you travel, because a lot of people will do it for other people, right? Like they care about getting the right Instagram photo, getting
Yeah.
impress others, but then you kind of lose sight of the bigger picture. So definitely
Damn, I
a
would listen to that.
separate conversation, but I think it does make for a really good point.
Agreed.
Back to the rapid fire. If you had to disconnect completely for a month, what would be the first thing that you'd do? So no YouTube, no career. What would be the first thing that you
Oh, I would die inside. But but the second thing I would do, maybe like a winter ski resort. I haven't been skiing in years, but that's like on my list of like my dream vacation.
I love it. You could probably get a video. There's got to be some like tech related things with whether that's like professional skiing or like ski lifts or something that
Yeah,
people would find interesting. I feel
totally
like we
agree.
could definitely do something there. All right.
That'd be
What's
fun.
one piece of tech you secretly love and one you think that's overrated?
Ooh, I love that question, dude. These questions are so good. Okay, tech that I secretly love. So it's got to be like not great for you, right? Let me think about this.
Doesn't need to be. It
Um,
could be something that a lot of people don't know. Like a phone's obvious, but like, is there something? It could be a coffee maker, like some little piece of technology that meant so much to you that other people like might not know about.
Okay, well, a milk frother like came to mind right away, and I think a lot of people like I always joke with my mom when I was in like at NYU, I would sometimes be late to class, and it was because I was like using my milk frother. I feel like it just like adds like casual magic to making coffee in the morning. So that's like a small one that I really like. And then one that I think is overrated. Um, Okay, this one I feel like I would say some of the like filter apps to like edit photos. Like I think that people are over editing their pictures a little bit on Instagram. Like I don't think we need the third party filters. I think people want like a tasteful edit. So those would be like my overrated ones.
Got you. Makes sense. And then based on the amount of technology that you use on a daily basis and how plugged in you are, what's one thing that you do every day that makes you feel more human?
Love that. I think hanging out with friends, and going to the gym. Like I think the ability to like move your body, like kind of regrounds you. You have to be super present, especially if you're like playing basketball or something. Like you have to be present in the game. And then like friends and family is always a good reset. What
Totally.
about for you?
Yeah, the human thing, I think, or the in person thing is the biggest. I mean, that was part of my why of doing this and doing consos. Like I realized I really love being around people. I love meeting new people. I love having these conversations and helping people, and then I also love the travel aspect. And I was like, well, how can I bring together people at scale, help them, and then also hopefully get a chance to do this in other places that allow me to go explore. And that was where a lot of almost reverse engineering, like what are these things that I want out of life, and allowing it to
Yeah.
fall back into this. So I try to make time for whether that's seeing people and grabbing dinner, or just setting up calls to kind of shoot the shit and talk and catch up with people. I think some people view that as like, oh, it's pulling time away from the big goal, whereas I see that as just something that naturally enriches my life. So that's probably mine.
Totally agree. Yeah, it kind of feels like you're reverse engineering like the perfect company. Like I could just see you doing digital wellness events like all over the world and writing a newsletter and making content that reaches millions. And I think it's like so exciting. Feels
That
really
is
aligned.
the goal. So that's what we're working on day in and day
It's gonna
out.
happen. Yeah.
Right.
I'm excited for you.
Last question, and then I will give you a chance to tell people where they can find you. But I think you asked some variation. It could have been the exact one, but some variation
Okay.
of this to Marquez Brownlee in your interview.
Oh no.
But if you
Okay.
had to use only one piece of tech for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Ooh. Okay. By necessity, probably my phone.
Yeah.
If the phone is all like out the table and it's something else, I think my headphones are like a big one because I walk around all the time in New York and I listen to like podcasts and audiobooks. I think it's like the best way. Or also, okay, this one's like very niche, but for people that haven't heard of it, Notebook LM is like the coolest AI tool of all time. I actually think it's the one that has changed my life the most. It's basically like the main criticism that people have right now with AI is that it hallucinates a lot. So like it will tell you an answer wrong, but like confidently. So if you don't know a lot about the topic, you now like walk around with false information. Notebook LM allows you to just upload source material and then it will base its prompts directly on what you've put into it. So you can upload like a textbook about biology, and then when you ask like a question about like um, how cells like decompose or whatever, it will then like just give you information from the biology textbook. And it also will do it in an AI podcast with two hosts that have like charisma with each other. So I would say that like it's pretty amazing, and I use it every day. Like if I'm researching a topic that I don't know a lot about, that will be like my first point of attack.
And where you, yeah, one, I love that. And the AI podcasts are like, I've genuinely found myself like laughing at some like the little.
Me too.
So I don't know if that says more about me or the AI, but I think it's actually quite funny. But where are you finding that source material? Like, are you going to textbooks? Like, are you finding these big studies and PDFs online? Like, where's that initial research happening?
A lot of textbooks. I'll also find like case studies, like with especially AI, like they'll often release like a paper, and it tends to be like very technical. So it's like a lot of the coding language, like DeepSeek released it since it was an open model, like all of their stuff. And I wanted to learn about it, so I like put all of that into the AI model and then had it explain. And I think that's like only your first point of attack. Like you definitely want to talk to experts and do other research, but it just makes it a lot more digestible. And you can also like say to it like, give me analogies only around basketball. So it's like it can then teach you how to learn. So I feel like the last decade was really defined by our ability to like memorize things maybe. And like the next decade I think is really going to be defined by our ability to ask really good questions. Because like the questions that you ask, like the prompting is actually the most important thing, because AI can do like a lot of the work of like finding the material. But like you have to get it there by asking really good questions. And I feel like that plays to like, I love to ask questions, like inherently that's like one of my main things, I feel like. So that helped a lot. So it's like coming up with really interesting questions, and then I feel like it's a skill that you just learn. So like you ask a question that like really doesn't go well, and then you ask a question that like gives you a better answer. Like for example, I'll often put in the prompt now like be incredibly obsessive and like fact check everything and make sure it's like 100% accurate. And like weirdly, that has led to more accurate answers, even like versus not saying that. So like all the small things add up, but a lot of case studies and papers.
Yeah, it's all about how you prompt it. And I read something, I forget where it was or even who said it, but it was essentially just talking about the biggest gap that's only continuing to widen is not that people don't have access to the same tools, because especially as internet adoption continues to increase, we all have access to a lot of the AI tools at the fingertips, but it's how you can go speak to them. And the people who give it really generic kind of half-ass answers are going to get that in the output. And the people who know how to speak to it, and specifically in a way where it's like very tailored to their niche or their vertical, are going to see just completely outsized returns. And that's naturally going to go and lead to outsized performance. And that has a whole list of cascading effects on the workforce and human development and a lot of those things. So I feel like we can do an entirely separate pod on that, and we probably keep the conversation going offline. But Jacklyn, thank you. This has been awesome. Greatly appreciative of you popping on and sharing.
No, you're amazing. I'm so honored to be here.
And then, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah. Okay. Love it. If you want to check out the YouTube videos, youtube.com/NBTJacklyn, or look up NothingButTech. And then similarly, Instagram and Twitter are all the same. And if you're a founder in New York and you want to come to the next dinner, it's Founders Dinner Club on Instagram.
Yeah. If you are a founder in New York, highly, highly recommend. Like I said, I've met some fantastic people and people that have, very quickly went beyond just people that I've met into true friends there. And Jacklyn is a huge reason for that. So
thanks.
Keep doing what
you're doing. You're the best. Anytime you come to the dinner, I'm like, all right, it's going to be a great one.
I love it. All right. Thank you, Jacklyn. This was awesome. See you guys next time.
Thank you. Dude, you're amazing. That was like